All right, so welcome back. I've had a couple days to kind of think about this. Again, I watch every Bruins and Wild game. I want to talk about the Hughes deal and kind of dive into it. And I've heard a lot of perspectives, and I've watched a lot of commentary and information from various people and YouTubers as well. So I'm going to kind of give my own take. A lot of people on YouTube do watch a lot more of Canadian hockey, a lot of Canucks. I happen to watch every single Wild game, and I have for years. Not to say like I'm a Bruins fan first, but I do watch every Wild game. So maybe this is a little different of a perspective. First, the Wild do get Quinn Hughes back. That is the big name everyone's talking about, which is great. Quinn Hughes left defense. He's only 26, a little on the shorter side, 5'10", 2 years at 7.85 million left on his contract. So the Wild really have about a year to work with him and try to see if he'll sign an extension, and if not, they're probably going to have to trade him. You can't let a guy like this walk for nothing, especially considering the assets you gave up for him. So there is that. We know a lot about Quinn Hughes. He is one of, and depending on who you talk to, the best defenseman in the NHL, if not the world. He is absolutely elite, and this is no surprise. He is a guy that leans a little more offensively, and there can be defensive breakdowns with a guy like Quinn Hughes. But that comes at the cost, that's kind of the cost of scoring at the rate he has. I don't think there's really any question that regardless of if you prefer offensive or defensive or two-way defenseman, Quinn Hughes should be at the top of anyone's list. So this year he's played 26 games. I wasn't going to put the stats up because, we all know, but 26 games, 2 goals, 21 assists, 23 points in 26 games. He's a -10 this year. Vancouver is bad as well. So factor that in. 27, 26 time on ice per game. Insane. Last year, 68 games played, 16 goals, 60 assists, 76 points. He was a +2. They just missed the playoffs, I think, by a point. I'm not 100% sure. They were close. 25-44 time on ice last season. Typically, over his career, he's been at or above a point per game type of player, which for a defenseman is always impressive, and you don't really see that aside from Hughes and Cale Makar on a consistent basis year after year, at least at the level that these guys put up points. Again, Hughes is an offensive defenseman. There has been and there will continue to be defensive lapses every now and then, but I think the Wild system fits Quinn Hughes very well. They're more of a hybrid tight defense, and they'll play man-to-man occasionally, which I think kind of caters to Quinn Hughes's abilities, right? He's a great skater. He's one of the best skaters in the league. It's right. He's elite at a lot of things, and I think this will really help with, kind of shoring up those defensive lapses a bit, and not really putting a whole lot of pressure on him night in and night out to make every single stick lift perfectly, and so on. There's only a few guys in the league that are elite defensive defensemen, and that's for a reason. It's extremely hard to do. So I think this is a player that will fit well into the Minnesota Wild system. They are a very defensively stingy team. They have great defensive defensemen on their roster, up and down the lineup, and they have some of the best goaltending They have probably one of the best goaltending tandems in the league, if not the best, and that's always up for debate. I'm not diving into that today. But yeah, so I think he's going to fit in well. The Wild have struggled a lot on their power play. This is a guy that will help. He'll also help with things like zone entries and so on. And we all know that he's got elite vision. He can make those stretch passes. We kind of know what Quinn Hughes is. He's great. No player is perfect, as we all know. But I think he'll fit a little better into the Wild system, at least in terms of the defensive aspect of the game. The offensive aspect, it remains to be seen. He's a playmaker. He'll generate offense out of nothing, so I'm not too worried about that side of the game. It's the defense I was a little concerned about. He'll likely be paired up with a guy like Brock Faber. Two younger guys. Brock Faber is a defensive defenseman at the end of the day. A lot of people look at stats and the goals expected and stuff, which I did a whole 30, 40-minute video on goals saved above expected and expected goals and all that. It's not my favorite stat to use, but to say the least, Brock Faber has been one of the most, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say one of the most elite defensive defensemen in the league, but he's a top tier defensive defenseman. And he can skate and put up points occasionally, and that's great. That's not his role. That's not who he is. It's kind of a part of the game, and his game, and it's evolving. But I think both of those partners together, Quinn Hughes and Faber, will make for a lethal pairing on that Minnesota Wild blue line. And then you have Spurgeon and Brodin as your next pairing. Brodin I would put in an elite defensive defenseman category. There's only I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 guys in the league I'd put in that category, and Brodin is without a doubt one of them. So there's that. And Spurgeon can provide offense, and he's solid defensively. And then your third pairing's what? Middleton and Zach Bogosian? That's kind of insane. Bogosian kind of being the wild card there, but up and down that defensive lineup is it's pretty potent. So Quinn Hughes, I think, is a nice addition. Similar play style to one of the players the Canucks receive in the trade. Quinn Hughes, a little further along in his career, a little more seasoned. So I think it's a nice trade-off for a team that wants to compete now and a team that is currently sitting in last place in the NHL. But I am wearing a Canucks jersey for a reason, and the Canucks are probably one of my least favorite teams. Nobody will top the Montreal Canadiens as my least favorite team because I'm a Bruins fan. But the Canucks are definitely up there, and a large part of that is because I'm a Bruins fan. But I've had questions about some of the moves they made in the past. I think they did a pretty good job with this one. They got a pretty decent return. And I'd almost make the argument that in a couple of years they're going to make out better than the Wild. Now, it's pros and cons, right? The Canucks wanted young roster pieces that can help them really progress and grow in a few years, right? They want this to be kind of a retool, a short, let's get back into contention within a year or two type thing. And I think they're able to do that, but they also have attained pieces that can sustain their success moving forward, should they develop appropriately. Whereas the Wild are more in win now mode, get out of the first round. It's been a story for years, and it's going to be tough this year. They're probably going to end up playing either Colorado or Dallas. I'd be surprised if the Wild win the division, but at the same time, they're desperate to get out of the first round and really make a statement. So let's talk about what the Canucks get. First, they get a first-round pick for this year. No surprise there. It could be, a late teens pick. It could be later on if the Wild do well in the playoffs. We'll see. It's supposed to be a deep draft. There might be some finds, some gems later on in this year's draft as well. I don't hate that for the Canucks. I almost feel like it's kind of like a throw-in, though, because it's a late first-round pick or potentially a late first-round pick. It is what it is, but it's a nice thing to have in your pocket. Who knows? You can also trade up in the draft and use this as one of your assets to trade up in the draft. Whatever the Canucks want to do, they have flexibility with this draft pick, which is great. Next up is Marco Rossi. Marco Rossi is a 5'9" center. Keep in mind he is the same height as a guy like Brad Marchand. Keep in mind he did not play hockey for a year because he had, heart complications from COVID. So he's 24 years old, kind of a year behind in that development, so kind of progressing at a rate of a 23-year-old at this point, which is kind of apparent based on his career trajectory so far. And it's been positive. He's done a lot of these little things. He was a really scrawny kid when he was drafted. He's really bulky and strong. He can play along the boards, take hits, gives hits. He's threw the gloves. He dropped the gloves and had a fight last year. He is a pretty solid guy. He is a centerman. He's a two-way center. He's very good defensively. Elite, I don't know if he's quite there yet, but his defensive game should not be slept on. He's very good defensively. And he's a playmaking offensive center. He keeps working on his faceoffs. They progressively get better every year. I think in a couple of years he'll be at least a 50% kind of guy. We know faceoffs and Elias Pettersson is a good example of that. We know it takes a few years. Connor Bedard is another example of that. It takes a few years for those players to really be elite or solid or even serviceable in some instances in that face-off dot. So he is signed for 3 more years, and that includes this year at $5 million, and then he's a restricted free agent. So that's pretty big. You have control over him. This season, he's played 17 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. He is a -6. He played at the beginning of the season when the Wild were absolutely awful. They were tough to watch. 18 minutes, 6 seconds average time on ice this year. And this is the first year he's missed any time playing. I don't have his stats up right now, but yeah. The 2 seasons prior, 2023, 2024, and then 2024, 2025, he played all 82 games. He's someone who is pretty healthy. I don't understand why there's a lot of people questioning the health of Marco Rossi. He's been pretty consistently healthy throughout his entire career, even pre-NHL and AHL, even in juniors. But last year, he played all 82 games, as said, 24 goals, and this guy isn't known as a goal scorer, but he gets into those gritty areas and plays a lot bigger than he actually is. Kind of like a Brad Marchand, right? 36 assists, 60 points. He was a +3 last year. He played 18-15 time on ice. Yeah, he's a really solid player. I would not be surprised to see him in a couple of years be a number 1 center, point per game type of guy, solid at both ends of the ice. But we'll see. He's behind Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. That's going to be tough to overtake. But at the very least, he's a top 6 center. He's one of those guys too that needs a little bit of speed on his line and needs a guy that can finish. Kind of needs, he's a playmaker and he's got really high IQ and good vision. He can make those passes and really generate offense off of the cycle and so on, or even off the rush. But he needs a guy with speed and he needs a guy that can finish. The Wild didn't necessarily have those pieces. He spent a lot of time playing with guys that were like, grinders for the most part. Yakov Trenin, Marcus Foligno's, Ryan Hartman, you can make the case for. Kind of those guys. Last year, a lot of his production didn't necessarily come when he was on the ice with Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello. So I think that speaks volumes to the player and how he's able to generate offense. I don't think him on a line with Zuccarello and Kaprizov was an ideal fit. I think his style of play is a little different than the style of play of those 2 players. So this kid is great. I love this kid. I'm really sad to see this kid go on a team I don't necessarily cheer for, but good for Vancouver. Next up is Liam Ogren, and he's an interesting one. He is a left wing. He's 21, 6 feet tall. He has 2 years left on his ELC at $866,666 and a restricted free agent. This season, 18 games played, no points. He's a -3, 932 average time on ice. This is a guy who lit up the AHL, continuously, got sent down, got called up, got sent down, and was never really given a solid look at the NHL level. And we've seen games where he started on the 3rd line, right? And then within, after 2 or so shifts, he's benched for a shift and so on. And we haven't really got to see and experience the full Liam Ogren experience. I don't know why it's, John Hines, the coach of the Wild, has very little faith in some of these younger guys. Exceptions kind of being Zeev Buium, because you kind of have to, and Yurov, because he really didn't have any other choice, which, is good for those players that they got an opportunity. But Liam Ogren never really got that look. Again, only 932 average time on ice, but when he is on the ice, he's got a great shot. He's solid defensively. He's physical. He's really good at defending. He's a good defender. Okay, yeah, I'll just leave. Whatever, I can't find those words. This is a really intriguing guy. If he gets a good look in Vancouver, maybe in a middle 6, top 6 role, on a consistent basis, I think this kid is going to surprise a lot of people. Wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being a top 6 winger at any point in his career. I like this kid a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential. And I do at one day project him to be, a second line winger. A consistent 20 goal, 60-ish point kind of guy that can play physical and play defensive hockey as well. We'll see. His development's been kind of odd in Minnesota. We'll see what Vancouver does with that development, and kind of where he's at in a couple of years. But that's a really intriguing player, and I was a little bummed out to kind of see him buried in the Wild system. I'm not going to lie. But we kind of knew this was coming, and it's good for Ogren and Rossi to really get that fresh start and really get a good look. Vancouver clearly values these players, considering they wanted them in exchange for Quinn Hughes. We'll see. I got my fingers crossed that it works out. I love both of these guys. But the last one is Zeev Buium. Arguably one of the best defensive prospects in the league, if not the best, depending on who you ask. He's really good. His numbers this year wouldn't really tell you that. He is 20 years old. He played at University of Denver University. He's 6 feet tall. He signed for 2 more years at $966,666 and a restricted free agent. All 3 of these guys restricted free agents. That's great. Zeev Buium, this year, his rookie year, 31 games played, 3 goals, 11 assists, 14 points. He's a -9. He does have only 2 points in his last 5 games, and part of that's because the Wild power play has been rough, and for the most part, Buium's really been paired on that third pairing with Zach Bogosian. There's been a little more defense required of Buium to play than, being paired with a guy like Brock Faber, for example. The -9 as well, take it with a grain of salt. There were at least 3 instances I've seen where he was about to jump off the ice for a line change and the other team scored. He jumped off. He was about to jump off for a line. He jumped off for a line change. I do apologize. And then the Wild scored, and that would have been a plus to his name, but didn't quite happen. A lot of this minus is from the beginning of the season, and some of it's kind of bad luck, and some of it, without a doubt, has been defensive lapses. There is some defense of part of his game he will have to continue to work on. He's a young kid, but at the same time, the last 2 games, he's played in the Minnesota Wild uniform. He has looked pretty solid defensively, and that's kind of scary. As a Wild fan that has to depart with Zeev Buium, he's looked pretty good defensively the past couple of games. This is a young player. There's work in progress. I don't read too much into the analytics because there have been bad games. There have been kind of bad luck scenarios that have negatively impacted Buium's analytics as well, which happens to a lot of players, and that's why you got to take some of those analytics with a grain of salt, right? But this is a player with elite offensive skills and the ability to defend should he continue to develop that side of his game, which is going to be a very dangerous combination. This is going to be a number 1 defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks for a very long time. I don't know if he'll ever get up to the status of Quinn Hughes, but he's going to be one of the best defensemen in the league, and it really wouldn't shock me if that happened. Next up, he has 18 minutes, 28 seconds average time on ice this year. A lot of that is from the power play, and he's been playing a lot of third-line minutes as well. But the power play points, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. So 8 of his 14 points on the power play. You can see there's a lot of potential there, but his power play does need a lot of work. The skating is there. It's not quite to the level of Quinn Hughes, but it's there. And I think if he's coached right and really taught and developed, I think there's going to be no stopping this kid because you can see the vision, you can see the confidence, you can see the willing to take hits, and he's not really a physical player, but every once in a while he'll make a hit and it'll be like, oh, cool. This is I think the Canucks did very well here, And I think some of these pieces were very undervalued by the Wild in Marco Rossi and Liam Ogren. I think Zeev and that first round were viewed as the big pieces for Quinn Hughes, and Marco Rossi and Ogren were more or less sweeteners, throw-ins to kind of help, sell sell the package. So it's going to work out well for both teams. I'm really, we're not going to be able to tell who won the trade in a couple of years, or right now, and it'll take a couple of years to see how these guys pan out, especially in a system like Vancouver, where development can be very hit or miss. So there's still questions to be had, but Marco Rossi, Zibulium, and Liam Ogren, you could be losing 2 top 6 forwards, a top 6 defenseman, and who knows what this first round pick brings out. So you could be losing a lot for a guy like Quinn Hughes. However, if the Wild win the Stanley Cup, it's worth it. If they don't win the Stanley Cup, they have to trade Quinn Hughes. It's not great, but you take a swing and you try, right? You don't hit a home run by watching the strikes go by you. You got to swing the bat. So that's what the Wild did. So we'll see. It's interesting. The Wild, in my opinion, need a little help offensively. They're very good defensively, very good goaltending. Their offense tends to be kind of an issue at times, and Quinn Hughes is definitely going to help out with that. And you can sacrifice a little bit of defense for offensive production. That being said, the Wild still need a little more, especially in their top 6. I'd say Urov is fine as the top line center for now, with Ek in that number 2 spot. They could use another centerman, maybe a top line center. That's going to be really hard to get as well. But at the very least, they need some type of top 6 winger, right? Is Johansson going to be the answer for the rest of the season? He has so far, but again, he's having a career year at, how old is he? 30, 36, 30, I don't know, mid-30s, right? Is it sustainable? Zuccarello's on his second injury this year. What's that going to look like when he gets back? Is he going to get hurt again? You got to have that depth there, and right now there really isn't a whole lot of guys that can step into that top 6 and at least look serviceable. So that's kind of the big question. I think they really need to figure out a solution for a top 6 winger, regardless of which side it's on, left or right is fine. I think you have needs on both, and you have guys that can switch to both sides, like a Marcus Johansson, for example, like a Matt Boldy. So I don't think the Wild are done. I think this is a nice piece to help them. Really, really help them, right? This is, again, one of the best players in the league. We know that. But I think the Vancouver Canucks did very well. Probably, I don't know. So I'm wearing a Vancouver Canucks jersey because I really think that, on initial looks, they gave away the best player. They did not get the best player in the draft. However, they got a very, very nice return, and I think a lot of these assets are very undervalued, especially by a lot of the people who look at analytics, a lot of the people who don't necessarily watch the Wild or these players play. So a lot of these players are excellent players and have extremely bright futures. I think the Canucks did their homework here. They knew who was undervalued, and they took advantage of it. And it should work out well for Vancouver. And Marco Rossi is still one of my favorite players. And bias aside, he is a very solid player. There are times where you want a little more from him. It is what it is, right? He's a young player, he's developing, but it's going to be tough. But that's all I got. Kind of breaking this down a little more, kind of giving a different perspective, at least a perspective from somebody who watches the Minnesota Wild. All 3 of these pieces are fantastic. In addition to the first round pick, it's a good return for Vancouver, and I don't think Vancouver fans will be disappointed in this return. You have 2 guys that can immediately slot into your top 6. Liam Ogren, depending on how he does and who he builds chemistry with, maybe on that top 9, and you have a direct replacement for Quinn Hughes. Not quite as good just yet, but he's young. He'll develop. He'll be good, and he'll get you points. And if he keeps working on his defensive side of the game, that's a huge bonus as well, because he's shown a lot of promise defensively. It's just, can he do that on a consistent basis and manage some of those decisions he makes in that offensive zone? You can still tell he's a rookie. He's trying to do some of the moves he did in college that don't quite work at the NHL level, but he's adapting and he's learning, which I think is extremely positive, because not every player does that, and you see their development kind of stunt at that. So really positive stuff. That's all I got. This video is already way too long. I appreciate you all, and take care, all right?